A lone cowboy thought he was saving people, but accidentally ignited the bloodiest war on the border. Welcome to Wild West storytelling. Let's get started. The early wind howled across the Wyoming plains, carrying with it red dust and a cold so sharp it cut through skin. The sky hung gray and silent, as if holding its breath before something inevitable. Beneath the twisted branches of a dried oak tree, a figure dangled, the rope creaking with every gust. Harlan Creed, the reclusive cowboy living on the edge of the valley, tightened his grip on the reins as he took in the scene. His horse froze, puffing white mist into the fog. A wooden sign nailed to the tree rattled against the trunk, its words scrawled in black charcoal. Land thief, unforgivable. Harlan frowned. He had seen men hanging before, but never anyone still alive. Her brown eyes were barely open, breath shallow, bare feet twitching faintly in the air. Tangled hair veiled half of her bruised face. Instinct told him to leave. Do not get involved. In this lawless land, saving the wrong person could bring a tribe or a gang of outlaws to skin him alive. But there was something in her eyes, not pleading, but defiant, that rooted him to the spot. Damn it, Harlan muttered, pulling a hunting knife from his belt. With one clean slash, the rope snapped. She collapsed into his arms, light as a child. He did not know that in that moment, he had just set off a war that would burn away what little peace remained in his life, and lead him to a love he had never dared believe in again. Harlan knelt beside the girl, his breath ragged in the skin-splitting cold. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck and felt a faint pulse, weak, but alive. Her brown eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain and exhaustion. Do not leave me. Her voice was hoarse, like dry leaves scraping against one another. Easy now, Harlan muttered, shrugging off his long leather coat and draping it over her trembling body. He tore a strip from an old shirt and bound it around the gash on her upper arm. A deep knife wound, the dried blood forming dark patches against her sun-browned skin. Her name was Ayanna, or at least, that was what he guessed from the broken whispers slipping past her lips. An Apache name, which meant trouble was not far behind. Harlan knew this land. Endless grass plains, treacherous canyons where both outlaws and warriors hid. If an Apache girl had been hanged in white man's territory, it was no accident. He did not ask why. He did not need to. The only thing he knew to do was run. He lifted her onto his horse, feeling the chill of her skin seeping through the damp fabric. The horse snorted, hooves heavy as it descended the hillside, leaving behind the creaking rope swaying in the wind. Harlan's wooden cabin sat buried in a small valley, cut off from every trading trail. The windows were shut tight to keep out the night wind. Inside, only the flicker of a wood stove lit the room, carrying the faint, musky smell of tanned leather. He laid the girl on his old bed, one that had not held anyone but him for years, then rummaged through a wooden chest for bandages, clean water, and a bottle of strong liquor. Ayanna groaned softly as Harlan cleaned the wound. He soaked a cloth in liquor and pressed it to her skin. This is going to sting, he murmured. She bit her lip, tears slipping free. But she did not cry out. That toughness caught him off guard. So different from what he expected of a helpless girl. When Harlan untied the rope burns around her wrists, he saw the deep, purple marks, thorns still clinging with dried blood. They had bound her tight, as if afraid she would fight to the very end. What did you do? Harlan asked quietly. To make them hang you out there in the wild like that? Ayanna's eyes cracked open, meeting his, not with gratitude, but with wariness. Will you hand me over to them too? Harlan shook his head, his voice low and rough. I cut you down. Does that answer your question? A strong gust rattled the cabin's seams, making the fire jump. Somewhere out there, faint but ominous, came the sound of horse hooves. Harlan's calloused hand closed around the old Winchester leaning against the doorframe. He knew the night would not stay quiet for long. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story stirs something in you, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow, I have something special just for you. Night draped the valley like a thick blanket of charcoal. The wind hissed through the canyon walls, blending with the creak of wooden hinges and deepening the isolation of the cabin. Harlan stood by the window, eyes fixed on the faint trail below, washed pale by moonlight. He heard horse hooves, steady at first, then falling silent, like wandering ghosts. Inside the small room, Ayana lay motionless on the bed. Her breaths were shallow, her wound still seeping blood, yet her face looked calmer with her eyes closed. Harlan did not believe in that calm. He had lived too long in this land to know. When the wind dies down, the storm is coming. He pulled the old Winchester from the rack and checked each round. 7 bullets. Not much, but if it came down to leaving the girl behind or risking his life to keep her safe, Harlan already knew what he had chosen the moment he cut her down. The crunch of gravel under hooves rose again, this time closer. Harlan eased the shutters open just a crack. Shadows moved between the pines, flickering in the cold moonlight. 3, 4, then 5 riders. Their backs were draped in hide blankets, guns slung at their sides, moving silent enough to make the hair on his neck rise. A knock broke the silence. 3 raps. Slow, deliberate. Harlan did not open the door. He stood behind it, rifle raised to his shoulder. "Who is it?" His voice was low, hard as a whetted blade. From outside came a deep voice, carried on the wind. "The woman you cut down, she belongs to my tribe." Ayana jerked awake, eyes wide, panic flooding her face. She stammered something in her native tongue, fast, desperate. Harlan glanced back at her, frowning. "Who are they?" he asked. "My father," she gasped. "The chief. They think you kidnapped me." Harlan cursed under his breath. In their eyes, he was no savior, just another enemy. Saving her had signed his death warrant. The sound of horses circled the cabin. Heavy footsteps thudded on the porch roof. Silhouettes flickered in the firelight leaking through the cracks. Apache warriors, faces streaked with red paint, bows and spears gleaming. A voice, old and commanding, thundered, "Return my daughter, or die where you stand." Harlan's grip on the rifle tightened, his heartbeat slow but heavy. He knew if he fired, blood would spill and there would be no way back. But if he handed her over... The desperate look in Ayana's eyes cut straight into him, into a man who had once sworn never to get tangled up with anyone again. For the first time in years, Harlan felt he had to choose a side, even if it meant standing against the world itself. The cabin door burst open. Night wind swept in, carrying the chill and the smoky scent of the tribe's campfire outside. Harlan stepped out, broad shoulders cloaked in worn leather. Moonlight carved harsh lines across his scarred face, the face of a man who had lost more than his own life. Before him stood a row of Apache warriors, spears and bows drawn, arrowheads glinting in the firelight. At their center, astride a towering black horse, was an older man with dark hair streaked with silver. Tocayo, the tribal chief. His face bore deep creases of age and hatred alike. His voice rolled across the valley. "The woman you cut down, she is my daughter. Why do you keep her?" Harlan drew a deep breath, his tone rough but steady. "I cut her down because I saw injustice. No one deserves to die like that, no matter who they are." Murmurs rippled through the warriors. A few raised their spears higher, steel tips flashing. Tocayo lifted a hand, and silence fell instantly. His eyes locked on Harlan's sharp as a blade. "Injustice?" he sneered. "She betrayed the tribe. She led outsiders into our sacred lands. Because of her, 3 children and their mother were slaughtered by white men's guns." Harlan froze. He turned toward Ayana. She stood trembling in the cabin doorway, tears streaking her face. She cried out in Apache, her voice breaking with desperation. Tocayo barked a reply in the same tongue, his words cracking like a whip in the night. "Harlan roret. Translate it. Tell me what the hell is going on." Ayana turned to him, lips quivering. "My father. He thinks I sold them out. But it was not me. It was my brother." He sided with the gold hunters. "I tried to stop them, but no one believed me." Harlan's chest tightened. He knew that feeling, betrayed by your own blood. But Tocayo was deaf to it. He yanked the reins, his horse stepping forward. "Give her back to me," Tocayo growled. "You do not understand our blood. Our laws." Harlan raised his rifle, hand steady. "I do not understand your laws, but I understand right and wrong. She lives because she is innocent, and I am not handing her over." A hiss of anger rippled through the warriors. Bows drew tight, horses pawed the earth. The night seemed ready to explode. In that heartbeat, Ayana stepped out of the cabin. Her hands rose high, clutching something that glimmered pale under the moon. A stone talisman carved with sacred tribal marks. Her voice rang out, laced with tears and defiance. If you still believe in the mountain spirits, then hear me now, one last time. Thank you for being here. If this story brings back memories of dusty sunsets and hoofbeats echoing in your chest, hit that subscribe button, so every day we can sit together once more, and I will share with you another tale from the West. Ayana's scream echoed through the valley, bouncing off the canyon walls, tearing apart the air wound tight like a drawn bowstring. Every arrow held taut suddenly froze mid-aim. Even Tokayo, the tribal chief, tightened his reins, his black eyes burning with a mix of rage and doubt. Ayana stepped forward, bare feet pressing into the cold earth, hand raised high with the stone talisman engraved with the sacred tribal mark, a symbol only descendants of the chieftain were allowed to bear. Firelight revealed the bruises on her neck, the raw red imprint of the rope. "What daughter who betrays her people," she shouted in Apache, voice trembling but unyielding, "still carries the sacred mark of the tribe upon her chest?" Murmurs rippled through the line of warriors. Some lowered their bows, exchanging uneasy glances. Takeo clenched his jaw, but hesitation flickered in his eyes. Harlan stood silently beside her, unable to understand the language, yet reading the shift in the air. His hands gripped the Winchester tight, heart pounding, knowing this young girl was wagering everything on her words. Ayana spun toward a warrior at the far end of the line, a younger man whose face drained pale when her gaze met his. Her voice rose, breaking but fierce. "It was my brother, Nakoa, who betrayed us. He led the gold hunters into the sacred valley. He slaughtered my mother and her children, then blamed me to cover his own sins." A wave of shock rolled through the warriors. Nakoa, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes feral, ripped a knife from his belt and roared, "You lying whore! You dare slander me before our father?" Tokayo snapped his head toward his son. "Is it true, Nakoa?" Nakoa did not answer. He charged at Ayana with a savage cry. Everything happened in a blink. Harlan raised his rifle and fired. The gunshot cracked like thunder, the bullet striking the ground inches before Nakoa's feet, forcing him to halt. "Enough," Harlan bellowed, voice booming like a storm. "I do not know your laws, but here, on this ground, no one else dies unjustly." But Nakoa did not stop. He swung the knife, lunging for Harlan. Another Apache warrior, older, seemingly loyal to Tokayo, shouted and drew his bow. Chaos erupted, horses screaming, steel clashing, cries of rage echoing across the valley. In that instant, Tokayo stood frozen, his gaze darting between his two children, one who had been hanged unjustly, and one now lunging with bloodlust. The truth stabbed at him like a blade. Years of hatred had blinded him to the real traitor. His eyes hardened, sorrow turning to fury. Tokayo drew his tomahawk from the saddle and roared, "Drop your weapons, the traitor pays tonight." Tokayo's roar thundered across the valley like a crack of lightning. But Nakoa, lost in a frenzy, heard nothing except the pounding of blood in his ears. With a feral scream, he lunged at Harlan like a cornered predator. Harlan swung the Winchester up, but before he could fire, Nakoa slammed into him, knocking the rifle from his hands. The knife flashed silver, slicing across Harlan's cheek, leaving a hot, searing trail of blood. The pain jolted awake, the instincts of a man forged by years surviving the brutal frontier. He seized Nakoa's knife arm, twisted, and hurled him into a wooden post. The crack of bone rang sharp in the night. The young warrior bellowed in pain, but rose again like a wounded wolf. Around them, chaos erupted. Apache warriors split in two, some loyal to Tokayo lowering their weapons, others siding with Nakoa, bows drawn and arrows ready to fly. Shouts in their native tongue mingled with the frantic pounding of hooves and the whistle of wind through the canyon. Ayana stood frozen for a heartbeat, then rushed toward her father, tears and fury tangled in her voice. "Father, look at him. He is the one who killed Mother and framed me." Tokayo's bloodshot eyes locked on his eldest son, and at last, he saw what he had refused to see, the lie. "What did you do to them?" he roared. Nakoa sneered, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. "I did what I had to do to survive. This land, this gold, it is mine." He ripped an arrow from his belt, lunging toward his father. But Harlan had already retrieved the Winchester. The rifle cracked, the shot striking the ground at Nakoa's feet, kicking up a spray of dirt and rock. "Enough," Harlan bellowed, voice hoarse but thundering. "No one else dies for this blind hatred." The warriors faltered, weapons hovering midair, bows lowered, spears hesitated. A hush fell heavy over the chaos. Tokayo strode toward Nakoa, each step heavy as judgment. Wind whipped ash from the dying fire, painting the scene like some cruel vision. "You have betrayed your blood," Tokayo said, voice thick yet unyielding. "Your kin, your mother, and the land itself. The Apache do not forgive such sins." Nakoa screamed one last time and charged, knife raised high. Tokayo's tomahawk swung in a single clean arc, swift and final. Steel met flesh with a dry thud. Nakoa collapsed, eyes wide, dead with hatred still burning in them. Ayana fell to her knees beside her brother's body, not out of grief, but for the tragedy finally ending. A weight lifted from her soul at last. Tokayo placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. His eyes aged decades in a single night. "My child," he whispered, voice breaking. "Forgive me for not believing you." The wind howled through the canyon like the mourning cries of fallen spirits. After Nakoa fell, the Apache warriors on both sides stood frozen, eyes wide with shock, hands still clenched around spears and bows yet unable to move. Smoke from the warfire coiled upward, mingling with the acrid tang of blood that blanketed the valley. Harlan lowered the Winchester, his shoulders trembling with exhaustion. Years of solitude on the frontier had never prepared him for this. Standing in the heart of a tribal feud he had been taught all his life to avoid. And yet here he was, the man who pulled the trigger to end the bloodshed, not for his own honor, but for the clear, unyielding light in Ayana's eyes. Ayana knelt beside Nakoa's body, slender hands trembling as she closed her brother's eyes. Tears streaked her dust-stained cheeks, yet she spoke no word, only bowed her head in silent prayer, whispering in her native tongue. Though Harlan could not understand the meaning, the sound alone tightened his chest. Tokayo stood beside his daughter, his face etched with regret and weariness. His voice rasped, as if pulled from the deepest well of a father who had lost nearly everything. "I was blind. I let my son's lies cloud the truth. Ayana, and you, Harlan. I owe you both my life." Harlan said nothing, only gave a slow nod. Words had never been his strength, but his gaze carried the answer. No more hatred. A young warrior stepped forward, placing his spear on the ground and bowing before Ayana and Tokayo. One by one, the others followed, weapons dropping to the earth. The faint clang of metal rang soft yet heavy, like distant thunder. At last, the valley fell silent. No cries of war, only the deep sigh of release. Ayana rose, her eyes red yet fierce with resolve. She turned to Harlan, her voice breaking but steady. "You saved me, more than once. From now on, you are not an outsider. You are family." The words struck Harlan still. He had lived like a drifter his whole life, a man without kin, without faith, a heart locked behind scars. But here, in the ashes of battle, he found something he thought lost forever. A place to belong. Tokayo placed his calloused hand on Harlan's shoulder and spoke solemnly, his English rough but clear. "You are brother to this tribe now. Your blood is our blood. From this day, this land is also your home." In that moment, the wind that swept through the valley no longer carried the screams of war, but the quiet song of dawn, the beginning of a new story. The fire crackled softly, casting a pale golden light on the weathered face of Harlan Creed. His hair was nearly white, his beard a tangle of gray. Yet his eyes, though dimmed with age, still held the quiet gleam of a man who had once glimpsed beauty amid a ruthless wilderness. He drew the old cloak tighter around his shoulders, leaned back against a log, and watched the flames dance in the dark. "You ask me," he began, voice low and rough, "what I did, back in the place they call Blood Valley." A faint chuckle escaped him, not of joy, but of a man who had spent a lifetime learning the worth of a single moment. "Back then I was alone, living just to survive, until I met the girl, Ayana. A child of the tribe folks said we should fear. I cut her down from a hanging rope thinking it was just the decent thing to do. But I never expected—" He paused, eyes fixed on the fire as if seeing ghosts in the flames. Never expected she'd be the one to save me. Save my soul from turning to stone. Outside, the wind whispered through dry birch trees, rustling like the murmurs of memory. People say the frontier is only guns and blood. But I learned something else. Sometimes, all it takes is a hand reaching out at the right moment, a look without judgment, to change the fate of two lives. And sometimes, it changes an entire tribe. Harlan poured a bit more black coffee from the tin pot, took a sip, and let the bitterness spread across his tongue. He glanced at the young faces gathered silently around the fire, faces unmarked by war, knowing it only through stories. You ask me, was it worth it? A soft smile tugged at his lips. Worth it. Because I found a home. Not in land or timber, but in people who chose to stand together when the world tried to tear them apart. The fire sang with the wind, the young eyes reflecting the glow of fading embers. Harlan laid a hand over his chest, where he still kept the stone carved with the tribal symbol, Ayana's gift from that fateful night. If someday, he said quietly, you lose your way out there, remember this. Do not let fear strip you of kindness, because only kindness will see you through the Wild West. He fell silent. The fire popped a few last sparks, then sank to glowing coals. In that hush, those listening did not just hear an old tale, they saw themselves in it. Weary travelers too, yearning for a place to call home. Once again, I am truly honored to have you here. Tell me your thoughts about this story in the comments below. Type the number 1 if you loved it. And do not forget to subscribe, so you will not miss the next thrilling tale from the Wild West.